One shot. That was all it took to change the rules in Harlem without starting a war. One shot at point-blank range and then a sound that was not the gun at all. It was the shell casing spinning on a diner floor, ringing like a tiny bell as it rolled and refused to stop. April 3rd, 1962. Wells Restaurant, 135th Street, Harlem. The place was supposed to be neutral ground. Everybody knew that. Everybody respected it. But that night a man walked in like the rulebook was a joke, and everybody in the room expected Bumpy Johnson to do what Bumpy Johnson always did when someone tried to embarrass him. They expected the razor. They expected blood. They expected a lesson delivered loud. Instead, the lesson came quiet. It came from a bodyguard's trigger, a casing on tile, and the way Bumpy did not even flinch when death tried to sit down at his table. Wells at that hour had its own kind of life. The lights were lower, the jazz on the radio was soft enough to let you hear the forks, the plates, the hush of coats brushing past booths. Cigarette smoke floated under the ceiling like tired ghosts. A waitress named Leela moved between tables with a pot of coffee that never seemed to empty, calling grown men baby, the way only Harlem women could, not flirtation, not fear, just control. Outside, the street was cold and wet. A shoeshine boy who should have been asleep sat on a milk crate near the door, watching the sidewalk like it was a stage. A church mother in a scarf had come in for a bowl of soup because grief does not keep office hours. Two men in work boots ate quietly, hands still stained from a late shift. Harlem did not stop just because it was dark. Bumpy sat in his usual corner booth, the one that could see both doors and the kitchen pass-through without looking like it was trying. He wore a dark suit and a tie pulled tight like he was still in daylight. He ate slow, not because he was enjoying it, but because he never rushed anything. In front of him was a plate that had cooled a little collard greens on the side, a piece of cornbread untouched, and a silver pocket watch laid beside his coffee cup like it belonged there. People who did not know him thought it was a decoration. People who did know him understood it was a signal. Bumpy never needed to stare at the door to know who had entered. He watched time instead. When you live long enough in a world where minutes can kill you, you learn to respect the clock. Across from him sat his wife May, elegant even in a simple coat, gloves folded neatly in her lap. She did not speak much that night. She did not need to. Her eyes did the talking, calm and sharp, reading the room the way Bumpy did, just with a different kind of intelligence. At the next booth, Bumpy's bodyguard, a thick-shouldered man named Leon Red Walker, sat with his back to the wall, hands relaxed, posture loose like a man half asleep. But Leon was not sleepy. Leon was the kind of man who heard a lie in a man's breathing. He had been with Bumpy long enough to know that in Wells, danger rarely announced itself. It smiled first. Harlem in 1962 was not a movie. It was a balancing act. It was mothers stretching food stamps, kids playing stickball under streetlights, men running number slips like they were carrying prayers. It was pride mixed with hunger. It was a neighborhood that had learned how to survive without asking permission. The Italians still wanted pieces of it. The cops still wanted their cut. Politicians still wanted the votes without the responsibility. And Bumpy Johnson sat in the middle of all of it, not as a loud king, but as a quiet one. He did not rule with chaos. He ruled with agreements that people actually followed because they believed in them. Wells was where those agreements lived. Inside those walls, you did not bring street business unless Bumpy allowed it. You did not raise your voice unless you were ready to lose it. You did not point a weapon unless you were prepared to die with it in your hand. That night the problem did not come from the street boys. It did not come from hungry men. It came from a system that hated the idea that Harlem could belong to itself. A man named Vincent Marron had been sent up from downtown to fix a situation. Vincent was not famous. He did not need to be. He worked as a collector for a family that believed they owned every dollar that moved in New York, including the ones that flowed through Harlem. He was the kind of man who wore clean suits and carried dirty intentions. He did not come to Wells because he wanted coffee. He came because someone had convinced him that Bumpy Johnson was getting old, getting soft, getting tired. Someone had told him that Harlem respect was just theater, and if you pushed hard enough, the curtain would fall. Vincent walked in with two men behind him and a smile that did not match his eyes. The bell over the door made a soft sound. That bell had been ringing for years. It had welcomed musicians and hustlers, preachers and cops. That bell had never sounded afraid. But when Vincent stepped under it, even the bell seemed to hesitate. The room felt it before anyone admitted it. Forks slowed. Conversation thinned. Leela the waitress paused with her coffee pot mid-pour, the steam rising between her and a customer who suddenly forgot what he had been saying. Vincent did not look around like a tourist. He walked straight through the room like he already owned the floor. He stopped at Bumpy's booth and did not ask to sit. He stood there, hands open, voice friendly enough to make strangers believe him. "Mr. Johnson," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Sorry to bother you so late." Bumpy did not look up right away. He took a sip of coffee. He set the cup down softly like he was placing it onto velvet. He glanced at his pocket watch, thumb brushing the metal. The second hand moved with steady patience. "You're not sorry," Bumpy said, almost gentle. Vincent smiled wider like he had expected anger and found none. "I'm here with a message. Simple one. Business has shifted. Some folks downtown feel like Harlem's been enjoying too much freedom." May's eyes sharpened. Leon's posture did not change, but his right hand moved a fraction closer to the edge of his seat. Leela took one step back, coffee pot still in hand, pretending she was wiping a table that did not need wiping. Bumpy finally looked up. His face held no heat. That was the dangerous part. Heat is honest. Calm can be a mask or a knife. "Freedom is not something you enjoy," Bumpy said. "It's something you defend." Vincent chuckled like he was at a comedy show. "That's poetic, but I'm not here for poetry. I'm here for numbers, the flow, the money, the people paying into your operation. The downtown boys want a piece, not a big piece, just enough to remind everyone who runs New York." Bumpy nodded once, as if he had heard a weather report. "And you volunteered to deliver that reminder." "I didn't volunteer," Vincent said. "I was chosen." Leon's eyes stayed on Vincent's hands. May's gaze went to Vincent's men. One of them was young, too young, jaw tight, trying to look like he belonged. The other was older, eyes trained on exits, a professional. Neither one looked comfortable in Wells. They were standing inside a rule they did not understand. Vincent leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, but still not enough to keep the room from hearing. "Here's the offer, 10%. A weekly tribute. You keep your restaurant, you keep your reputation. Downtown gets its respect. Everybody wins." Bumpy's mouth curved like it might become a smile, but it never did. He looked down at his plate, then at his watch again. The second hand moved. Quiet. Unbothered. 10%, Bumpy repeated softly, like he was tasting the words. "You walked into my house at 1 in the morning to ask me for 10%. Vincent's smile turned sharper. "Not ask, this isn't a request." That was the moment the room tightened. The church mother in the scarf stopped stirring her soup. A kid at the counter slid off his stool, sensing something without understanding it. Leela's face went pale, and for the first time she set the coffee pot down, hands empty, because she knew she might need them. Bumpy leaned back in his seat. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He just asked a question like a man checking a fact. "Who told you you could speak to me like that in Wells?" Vincent's eyes flickered just once, a small crack. "I don't need permission." Bumpy held that silence for a beat, letting Vincent hear himself. Silence is heavy when a room agrees with it. Then Bumpy did something that made the men near the door shift their weight. He took his napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it beside his watch. It was a small, precise motion. Not fear, not surrender. An act of order in a moment where someone was trying to create disorder. The napkin sat there like a flag. Vincent misread it. "That's right," he said. "Keep it polite. You're a smart man. You know how this ends if you don't cooperate." Leon's jaw tightened. May's fingers curled around her gloves. Bumpy's eyes stayed on Vincent, calm as winter. "Tell me something," Bumpy said. "You ever hear a room get quiet because it loves you?" Vincent blinked. "What?" Bumpy gestured slow with two fingers toward the people around them. "You hear that? That's not fear. That's loyalty. That's people waiting without being told." Vincent glanced around, and for the first time he really looked at the faces in Wells. The men at the counter, the waitress, the church mother, the shoeshine boy by the door. None of them were reaching for guns. None of them were shouting. They were just watching still like a congregation. Vincent had come with muscle. Bumpy had come with a neighborhood. Vincent swallowed and decided to push harder, because that is what men do when they feel the ground shifting. Neighborhood love doesn't stop bull. He said, and he nodded slightly. The young man behind him moved, hands sliding inside his coat. Leon saw it. He did not move fast. He moved right. He rose from his booth like he was standing up to leave, one smooth motion, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. He took 2 steps, putting himself at an angle Vincent did not notice until it was too late. Leon's voice was low, polite, almost respectful. "Don't." The young man hesitated. That hesitation was all the difference between a plan and a funeral. Vincent's smile twitched. "You got a bodyguard talking now. That's cute." Bumpy's eyes stayed on Vincent, and his voice dropped into something colder. "It's not cute. It's warning." The older man behind Vincent, the professional, read the room and understood. His eyes told Vincent something Vincent did not want to accept. This was not a place you could take with a threat. This was a place you could only lose in. Vincent's pride would not let him retreat. He leaned forward close enough that his breath reached Bumpy, and he said something that was not about money anymore. It was about humiliation. "You're not downtown," he said. "You're not at the table. You're still just." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The meaning was the insult, the old disrespect dressed up as business. May's expression changed. Not anger, disappointment, like she had just watched a man choose to be small. Bumpy's eyes hardened, not with rage but with clarity. "You don't know where the table is," he said. "That's your problem." Vincent scoffed. "The table is where my people sit." Bumpy nodded slowly, almost kindly, and that kindness made it worse. "Then you came here to die ignorant." Vincent's face tightened. "You threatening me, Johnson?" Bumpy didn't answer. He glanced down at his watch. The second hand ticked. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was faint, but in that room it was loud enough to feel. And then it happened. The young man finally committed. His hand came out of his coat with a pistol, fast and shaking, pointing down toward Bumpy's booth. He was nervous. Nervous men fire wrong. Nervous men hit bystanders. Nervous men start wars by accident. Leon moved before the gun fully cleared the coat. He did not tackle. He did not swing wild. He stepped in close, controlled, and pressed his own pistol into the young man's ribs, so close there was no space for bravery. Leon's finger tightened. The shot was not loud the way people imagine gunshots, not in a crowded room. It was a harsh, flat crack that seemed to steal the air for half a second. The young man folded, knees giving out like his bones had suddenly remembered they were not made of steel. His gun clattered onto the floor, sliding under a booth. But the gunshot was not the sound people remembered. They remembered what came after. The shell casing hit the tile and spun. It made a thin metallic ringing as it rolled in a slow circle, wobbling, refusing to settle. It sounded small, almost innocent. And because it was small, because it was calm after violence, it terrified them more than the shot. The casing rolled past a table leg. It rolled near the church mother's shoe. She did not move her foot. She just stared down at it like it was a sign. Vincent froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Bumpy stayed seated. He did not jump. He did not shout. He did not even look at the fallen man right away. He watched the casing roll, listened to that thin ring, and then lifted his eyes to Vincent with something like pity. Vincent's older man reached for his own weapon, but May spoke before anything else could happen. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a straight line. "Do not." The older man looked at her, and something in her tone told him she was not begging. She was stating an outcome. Bumpy finally spoke. "Pick him up," he said to Vincent, nodding toward the young man on the floor. "Take him out." Vincent stared, stunned, eyes wide, cheeks pale. You shot him." Leon's gun was still raised, steady. Leon did not smile. He did not celebrate. He looked like a man who had closed a door. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "He tried to start something in my house. Your boy made his own choice. My man ended it." Vincent's throat worked. "You think this ends it?" Bumpy leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table like he was about to explain something simple to a child. "This ends it because I'm telling you it ends. If you want to test that, you can, but you won't get a war. You'll get funerals, quiet ones, one at a time, and you'll never be sure who's next because you've never walked Harlem enough to know what eyes look like when they belong to me." Vincent glanced around again. The faces were still, not cheering, not panicking, waiting. That was the part that made him sweat. This was not chaos, this was order. Leela the waitress stepped forward carefully, hands trembling but her spine straight. She picked up a clean napkin from a nearby table. ND, without being told, placed it gently over the fallen man's chest, covering the stain spreading through his shirt. It was not mercy. It was dignity. Harlem did not like mess, even when it had to do hard things. The shell casing finally stopped rolling. It came to rest right beside Bumpy's shoe. Bumpy looked down at it and then looked back up at Vincent. "That sound you heard," he said quietly, "that wasn't just a warning. That was you learning where you are." Vincent's older man grabbed the fallen young man under the arms, hauling him up. Vincent moved like he was in a dream, not quite believing what had happened. His pride wanted to speak, but the room would not let him. He backed away, eyes on Leon, then on Bumpy, as if he expected Bumpy to stand up and finish him. Bumpy did not move. He did not need to. At the door, Vincent stopped. His voice came out smaller than he intended. "Downtown won't forget this." Bumpy's gaze did not change. "Harlem doesn't have to remember," he said. "It lives it." Vincent left, dragging his wounded man into the cold street. The bell over the door rang again, same as always. The room stayed silent for another moment. Then slowly, the air returned. Someone exhaled like they had been holding their breath for years. A kid at the counter started crying, not because he understood the politics, but because he had heard that shot and felt the world shift. Bumpy did not stand up to make a speech. He did not take credit. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a coin, and slid it across the table to the shoeshine boy near the door without looking. The boy caught it, eyes wide, and nodded once. Not gratitude. Duty. Leon stepped back to his booth, gun already put away, posture relaxed again. But his eyes stayed sharp. May reached across the table and touched Bumpy's hand lightly, her thumb brushing his knuckles. "You all right?" she asked. Bumpy looked at her, and for a second the hardness in his face softened. "I'm fine," he said, "but that boy was." May's eyes flicked toward the wounded man being carried out. "He came here to prove something." Bumpy nodded. "He came here to be used." Bumpy picked up the shell casing from beside his shoe. He held it between two fingers, turning it slowly in the light like a man studying a tiny piece of truth. Then he placed it on the table beside the pocket watch and the folded napkin. 3 objects: time, cleanliness, consequence. He let them sit there together. Word moved faster than police radios. Before sunrise, men on street corners were repeating the story with the same detail every time. Not the name of the young man, not the family downtown, not the percentage. They repeated the sound, the casing on the tile, the ring that rolled across Wells like a warning bell. They said Bumpy did not raise his voice. They said May did not blink. They said Leon fired once and the whole room stayed still like the shot had frozen time. That was the message, not violence. Control. By the next evening, a man with a nicer suit than Vincent and a softer smile came into Harlem with no gun showing and no pride on his sleeve. He did not walk into Wells like he owned the floor. He waited at the door until Leela nodded. He approached Bumpy's booth with his hands visible. "Mr. Johnson," he said respectfully, "there's been a misunderstanding." Bumpy looked at his pocket watch just like the night before. Tick, tick, tick. He did not answer right away. He let the man sit in his own nerves. Then he said there was no misunderstanding. There was disrespect. The man swallowed. "We want peace." Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "Then bring peace, not offers." The man nodded quickly. "No tribute, no 10%, no collectors. We keep our people out of your neighborhood." Bumpy studied him like he was reading a letter. "And Vincent?" he asked. The man's eyes shifted. "Vincent is being reassigned." Bumpy leaned back. "Good," he said softly. "Because if he comes back, the next sound you hear won't be a casing on tile. It'll be his shoes running, and in Harlem, running only ends one way." The man agreed. He left. No war followed. No headlines, no bodies in the street. Just a quiet reset the way Harlem liked it when Harlem had the power to choose. A week later, Leela found the shell casing on Bumpy's table again, sitting beside the sugar jar like it belonged there. She picked it up carefully and turned it in her palm, her face thoughtful. "You keeping souvenirs now?" she asked, trying to smile. Bumpy looked up at her. "Not a souvenir," he said, "a reminder." "Of what?" Bumpy glanced toward the door, where kids laughed outside, chasing each other on the sidewalk like the world was safe. "Of how easy it is for a man to think he can take something," he said, "and how hard it is for him to accept he can't." Leela nodded slowly and set the casing back down. She understood. Harlem women understood more than people gave them credit for. Years later, men would tell that story wrong on perp. O's adding extra shots, extra blood, extra drama because some people cannot accept that power can be quiet. But the people who were really there always told it the same way. They described Bumpy's watch ticking. They described May's eyes. They described Leon's single shot. And they described that casing rolling, ringing, refusing to settle, like the neighborhood itself was speaking in metal. They said that sound did not just end a threat. It reminded Harlem who kept the peace, and it reminded outsiders that peace is not the absence of danger. It is the presence of control. History books do not carry the sound of a casing on tile. They carry names, dates, trials, and headlines. Harlem carried something else. Harlem carried memory. Harlem carried the feeling of a room going silent not because it was afraid, but because it respected the man sitting in the corner booth who did not need to stand to be heard. That is what made Bumpy Johnson different, not how loud he could be, how quiet he could stay when everyone else was shaking. He understood that fear is cheap, but loyalty costs something, and that is why it lasts. And maybe that is the real lesson in that late-night crack of a gun and the soft ring that followed. Violence is easy. Any fool can fire. The rare thing is restraint. The rare thing is precision. The rare thing is making sure the city does not burn just because one man wanted to prove he had matches. So if you were sitting in Wells that night and you heard that casing roll, what would you have felt first, fear or respect? If you want more Harlem legends told the way Harlem remembers them, subscribe and stay close.